This Teletrix sales pitch to a Tennessee Senate subcommittee was given on September 14, 2021. The individual on the left is Georgia State Representative Micah Gravely, who at the time was serving his last term in the Georgia legislature. The individual on the right is present Georgia State Representative Todd Jones, the lead sponsor of HB 1013 in 2022 and HB 520 in 2023, a bill presently before the Georgia Senate Health and Human Services Subcommittee, having passed the House by an overwhelming margin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate you taking time with us today. Greetings from the great state of Georgia. I want to say this, after listening to all of you, we are dealing with the exact same thing. We're dealing with how do you handle pretrial, how do you handle working with your bonding agents, how do you handle technology and monitoring.
Okay, let's stop there. Representative Gravely is offering the opinion that the state of Tennessee's problems are no different than those of his home state of Georgia. From the standpoint of our discussion here, that's an important point. It's important because if that is true, then we would expect that the solutions Gravely and Jones present to the legislature in Tennessee would be very similar to the solutions they would naturally present to the legislature in Georgia. After all, as Representative Gravely says, the problems in both states are identical. Let's go on.
How do we handle drug courts? What are we doing and how are we addressing this both legislatively?
Here, Representative Gravely suggests that the problem in Tennessee is naturally one that would be best addressed legislatively at the state and local levels. That's important because in making that statement, he's not asking whether the senators believe the problem he presents needs lawmaking to solve. Instead, he plants the idea that the only way to solve the problem is legislatively, saying matter-of-factly, how are we addressing this at both the state and local jurisdictions? This is very clever because the tense he uses already assumes that the problem is best solved legislatively, so that when the senators hear that, they realize that presently the problem is in fact not being solved legislatively, the purpose of which is for the senators to sense that something is missing from their body of legislation. Let's go on.
At the state, local jurisdictions in our local communities. So it was almost like we were sitting in some of Georgia committees when I heard some of the representatives addressing some of the issues.
Here's what is important for Georgians to consider at this time. Because Georgia has the same problems as Tennessee, Teletrix's purpose for Georgia is to address those same problems with the same solutions this sales team proposes for the Tennessee legislature. Naturally, those would be legislative solutions, in other words, lawmaking, for the entire state. So here we have two Georgia lawmakers attempting to sell a neighboring state on the idea of using their patented product and services to solve the very same problems lawmakers in Georgia will soon be asked to solve. Let's go on.
What we've done at Teletrix is address that very problem.
Here, Gravely represents to the senators that his company, Teletrix, has already addressed these problems that both Tennessee and Georgia are experiencing. And he's about to unveil that solution, which, as he has subtly presented as a foregone conclusion, can only be solved legislatively on the state and local jurisdictions. He adds that Teletrix is a very unique solution, impressing upon the senators that only his company can adequately solve these problems because no one else has a product like he is going to show them. As we will discover, whether Georgia legislators understand it or not, HB 1013 and HB 520 were both designed as Teletrix legislation solutions for Georgia. So why is it so important to these gentlemen that Tennessee, and as I will show, Georgia, employ legislative solutions to solve these problems? That's easy. State government is where the money is. State government is where the fountainhead of riches for business corporations to make extraordinary profits if they play their cards right. Georgia wins the distinction every year that it is the best state in which to do business. That's only because, evidently, Georgia politicians' palms are the easiest to grease.
With a very unique solution. And our solution addresses these common issues, reducing
The goal here would be for a Teletrix solution to be employed in every state, We're going to learn from these gentlemen that the Teletrix solution will only fulfill its prime directive if every state employs a legislative solution and a cooperative agreement among them to solve the problems they present here in Tennessee. Now, they would never say that, but the Teletrix solution requires a massive, collaborative, interagency database. Once a state employs the system, the range of the Teletrix monitoring system would extend far beyond the boundaries of any state, meaning that neighboring states would have to become parties maintaining this collaborative interagency database. Its law enforcement officers pre-authorized to arrest and return individuals to the jurisdictions whose boundaries they violated. So what we're really looking at if HB 520 passes is a mere segment of a nationwide dragnet system, practically the most dangerous law ever contemplated by a state government.
Recidivism, addressing mental health and addiction services.
Okay, this is important. I've heard people say that HB 520 does not pertain to Teletrix because Teletrix does not address mental health, quote unquote, only felons released on parole. That is not true. In this video, both Teletrix representatives repeat several times that Teletrix addresses mental health. HB 520 is all about mental health, and it is interesting to note that as a matter of course, mental health has become an umbrella for several human frailties, including drug abuse and alcohol abuse. The authorities to monitor them falling within the spectrum of purposes in this bill.
Removing the societal stigma and increasing employment opportunities. Protecting the victim with a geofencing app, which will give the victim alerts from 10 up to 500 miles out where an offender may be. And all with real-time monitoring and data analytics with exact location tracking.
Now, in the video of my second testimony before the Georgia Senate HHS Committee, you heard the committee chairman say that the term monitoring only refers to what it meant in the 1970s and is essentially peeing in a cup. This is where he is proven wrong over and over. The primary sponsor of HB 520, Todd Jones, is sitting on the right. He is one of 3 patent holders on the Teletrix monitoring system. The patent says it is an electronic monitoring device. The patent says the monitoring device tracks a person's location. The patent says it optimizes compliance by tracking key performance indicators and uses predictive analytics to adjust compliance programs as they apply to client throughout the system, matching the specs of the Teletrix patent. HB 520 in lines 762 through 764, as passed overwhelmingly by the Georgia House, requires the Georgia Analytics and Data Center to identify ways to use and share existing data for business intelligence and predictive analytic opportunities, and identify strategies to combine internal and external data sources. Folks, they can't do that by peeing in a cup. The specs on the Teletrix patent match the specs required in HB 520 to a T. Furthermore, by combining internal and external data sources, the Georgia Analytics Data Center would receive and continuously add data sent to it from the Teletrix monitoring system. All of that data would become part of an official record of each client in the system, maintained in an enormous and growing Georgia state database, which I have discussed earlier, would plug into a gigantic and growing multi-state database. I'm sorry, but they don't need something like that just to document the results of people peeing in a cup.
To include exclusion zones while also decreasing the cost to state, local jurisdictions, and end users.
All right, this is a good place to discuss the part of HB 520 where it describes the funding for jail in-reach and reentry programs. According to HB 520, the Behavioral Health Department shall, quote, establish a grant program to build local capacity with funding and technical assistance for one or more counties to create or expand collaborative jail in-reach and reentry programs. Such programs focus on familiar faces and strive to reduce recidivism. So starting at line 1 67, you'll see where the grant programs are authorized with funding and technical assistance. That technical assistance would be the Teletrix assistance. The collaborative jail in-reach and reentry programs, because they're collaborative, they require a common database with several jurisdictions. And when you're close to a border, or perhaps even as close as 500 miles to a state border, then those other states, those jurisdictions within them, would also have to be in the same database. So starting on line 888, there are 5 sources of grant monies to pay for all this, 2 of which are federal or state grants. So there would be a line item in the Georgia budget each year to pay for all this technical assistance from you-know-who. In line 152, the term familiar faces on the screen means individuals with serious mental illness who have frequent contact with the criminal justice, homeless, or behavioral health systems. The term serious mental illness, however, is not defined in the bill, which raises another concern. That concern is that the behavioral health community has begun to lump individuals with mental health problems or addictions into one category. And if they become familiar faces, an entire spectrum of different causes for behavioral problems can all fall into the category of serious mental illness. By grouping all of these people under the same diagnosis, that serious mental illness, everyone in the entire group could, at the stroke of a pen, find themselves being monitored by a Teletrix device.
Micah spoke a little bit about it, and you guys have been speaking about it this morning. Right inside of the app, we talk about so many things like mental health.
Once again, Todd Jones confirming that Teletrix is a solution for the government to deal with mental health.
Drugs, etc. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the things we realized was there was not enough business analytics.
Now remember that term, business analytics.
Now, for those of you kind of in business today, you hear all the time predictive analytics, business analytics, dashboards, you name it.
Okay, this is very important. This is where the law not only confirms that we are indeed talking about Teletrix monitoring systems, that is because what Todd Jones is about to say is that the unique capability of the Teletrix product is precisely the capability of what is prescribed in the bill. Beginning on line 762, the bill prescribes that the Georgia Data Analytics Center identify ways to use and share existing data for business intelligence and predictive analytic opportunities. That is exactly what the Teletrix product does, and it is unique among monitoring products in that respect. No one else has that. So the Georgia Behavioral Health Department has no other entities to choose from when letting contracts under HB520. HB520 was written under Todd Jones' supervision to specify Todd Jones' unique patented product to be used in thousands and thousands of cases falling under the Georgia Behavioral Health Department. But hey, we're still not done. Let's keep going.
They're fancy words, but what we wanted to be able to do was use this terabyte load of data to be able to provide information.
So here we see that under this plan, the Georgia Data Analytics Center will become part of a larger system, one using a common database under one collaborative jurisdiction, housing massive amounts of data, which when analyzed under the Teletrix Artificial Intelligence Predictive Model will yield an individual service plan for everyone in the system, a goal which happens to match the mandate given Georgia from the 2010 Obama Department of Justice settlement, which happened during the governorship of Sonny Perdue many years before Todd Jones ever decided to run for office, begging the question whether there is some kind of hidden hand at work designing these events. Let's press on.
And that information was going to hopefully either predict good behavior or bad behavior. Now, I want to stress, we're just looking at behavior. In addition, right inside the app, they have the ability to get mental health assistance, narcotics, suicide prevention, and also alcohol.
Once again, prevailing behavioral health thinking is to lump all of these human frailties under the same heading, mental health, and manage them all within the same predictive model.
But imagine being able to know exactly where everybody's at. Second, biometrics.
Now, finally, I want to call your attention to the Georgia Mental Health Parity Act, HB 1013 from 2022, lead sponsor once again, Todd Jones. You see on the screen a few lines from that bill. Let's read it. Line 1320, partner with Department of Community Supervision to evaluate the ability to share mental health data between state and local agencies such as community service boards and Department of Community Supervision to assist state and local agencies in identifying, tracking, and treating those under community supervision who are also receiving community-based mental health services. And so once again, they are lumping everyone together under this heading of mental health services and positively affirming the bill's sponsor's intention that all of these people will be tracked using a GPS tracking device. The problem for Representative Jones last year, however, was that because of outrage, the term tracking was deleted from the bill. In this year's follow-up bill, HB 520, sponsored by the same Todd Jones, instead of the term tracking, which raised heavy suspicion last year, the author of the bill rather used monitoring. But as we've seen, it makes no difference. Those terms are synonymous. Teletrix is a monitoring company which monitors what it tracks. Regardless whether any legislator believes the term meant peeing in a cup, viewed in its context and in the authorities of the bill, it can only mean tracking.
The biometrics that we have for outside the walls also happens inside the walls. So when you think about drugs, if you take meth, I can guarantee you, you'll go from about 70 of your heart rate to about 160.
How can you detect like the continual alcohol monitoring, or if someone's on drugs, if they're, or the type of drug they're using? Because like I said, I understand that the biometrics there, they may go up if you assume they're taking meth, but also they could be having a panic attack.
Sure.
So how can you distinguish it, or does your device do that?
Yeah, so my apologies. When I made that reference, that was around our inside the wire, not our outside the wire. We are working on, and will be done easily by the early 22, on a wearable that will take care of that exact issue, may it be drug or may it be alcohol. Right now, our outside the wire product does not make any representations that we can handle or tell you whether or not you're taking meth or whether or not you're having a panic attack, to your point.